Hey, thanks for joining me. So, I've decided to start on a new project. Maybe it's not that original. I think other people have done something similar, but it's about little white churches. And I have some background or history with little white churches. I grew up in one or a couple of them. So, my history, my grandfather was a perpetual deacon in the Episcopal Church. And we went to a church called St. James Episcopal. It was a little bitty, white wooden church. And we were there until I was about 5. I was baptized in that church. And then the bishop had my grandfather plant a church in Moore, Oklahoma. And it was called Holy Apostles Episcopal Church. And the building that they used was an army surplus or a war surplus chapel that they got from the government. And originally, that church actually that building had been at 2 other locations. So first, after the Episcopal Diocese bought it, they moved it to a church called All Souls Episcopal Church, where it was used while they were building some other building. And then it was moved to another church called St. David's Episcopal Church, where it replaced a renovated chicken coop, literally, that they were meeting in, until they built a new building. And then it was moved to Holy Apostles. It was there from about 1963 or 4, somewhere right in there, till the early 80s, I think it was. Then it was moved to another church in Yukon. I'm not sure the name of that one. And after that church was done with it and they had built something new, unfortunately they tore it down. But I grew up in this church. I was an acolyte. If you're a Roman Catholic, that's like an altar boy. So I helped my grandfather with services, and as I got older, I would help him with services outside the church, like weddings and funerals and things like that. So I grew up in this church and was there most of until about the time I graduated high school. And I decided I wanted to start looking for some of these because I've really, the presence of little white churches is really declining. They're just kind of going away. I mean, largely because the buildings are getting old, people are moving on to bigger, better buildings, and the need for these little small white churches is just not what it used to be. Unfortunately, though, it's kind of especially in Oklahoma and central part of the United States, really probably all over the United States, these little white churches are just kind of iconic. And they were part of our history for a long, long time. So I started a search to try to find some in my area that I could photograph, and using even AI tools, ChatGPT and Grok and Google AI, and trying to find these buildings. They're not really listed as little white churches or wooden churches or whatever, so there's only limited ways you can search them. A lot of it has just been using Google Earth or just Google Maps to look for churches, and then look at find these churches, look to see how big the building is and if it has a steeple, and then try to see a street view of it so that I can see if it's actually, white and wooden kind of church, or if it's rock, and some other kind of construction. So I have found some, though, that are in my area I'm going to be photographing. Yesterday, we went out, Charlie and Riley and I, and we did some scouting, and I found 3 of them. Of course, I knew where 2 of them were, so I really wasn't scouting so much. But, so the first one, and I'll show you some pictures of these. I just shot these with my EM5 Mark II. I haven't committed them to film or anything yet. The first one was the building that was St. James Episcopal Church. Now it's something else. And it's not your real typical church with a steeple kind of that I grew up in primarily. I was here till I was about 5. But there's this one, and there's another one called the Lord's House. It's on South Portland in Oklahoma City. And actually, before I was born, I found a newspaper article in the State Historical Archives that talked about the bishop tasking my grandfather with planting a church in this church building. And I don't even know what the name of that was. I haven't really tried to research it. But it didn't continue to be an Episcopal church for too long. I'm not really sure what happened with that. But it's still a church, and it's called the Lord's House. And actually, these pictures you're looking at of the Lord's House, I took with an Olympus EP1 with its 35mm f2.8 lens that I keep on it. And I took these, I don't know, several months ago when I was first thinking about this project idea. And now they've erected a big chain link fence around it, because I'm sure it seems like probably the church is not in use. And if they don't fence it off, then pretty soon people are moving in, you know, and tearing it up. And so it's right now it's kind of fenced off, so it's not real pretty, but I had some pictures that I took previously. And then another church that's not too far from me in a little town called Wheatland is a Wheatland Methodist church. And I like this building. It's not too dissimilar from what I grew up in. It's a cruciform or cross-shaped building. They got a steeple at one end, and the building the church building that I knew as at Holy Apostles was shaped a little bit differently, but you know, somewhat similar in that it had some of these same aspects. This one might also be a military surplus building. I really don't know. What I want to do with some of these churches, if I can, is make arrangements to actually go inside and photograph inside as well. So that's one of the things that I really want to do. So I'm going to reach out to some of these churches and see if I can arrange a time that I might go there and actually photograph interiors. The interior of the church I grew up in was all dark oak wood. The pews and, you know, the altar rail and the altar and everything were pretty dark wood. The one I grew up in had a pump organ in it, literally, until the early 70s. It literally had a pump organ that they used. Now, my grandfather had rigged up an electric blower, so the gal playing the organ didn't have to pump it. But anyway, it was a pump organ. So anyway, I want to see if I can get some interior shot and see if I can get inside some of these. I think that would be worth doing. So this project is going to be something of a long-term project. It's obviously going to take some continuing research and some scouting trips to try to find some of these places. I'm going to be creating future videos about the project as I scout some of these places out and actually photograph them, so I think that should be interesting. My desire is to shoot this predominantly on film. I'm going to probably back that up with digital. So film camera wise, I'll be using the rolleicord 4 that I've shown you in a previous video. I really like this camera, and you know, the square format I think is really I don't know, I just really love the square format, and I think for a use on a project like this it'd be helpful. Also probably be using this Century graphic 2x3 camera, and it's got a 80mm Schneider Zenitar. I think I've made a video about this camera before. Bought this actually at a flea market and got it all fixed up. I've actually ordered a ground glass back for this, which they're a little hard to find, but I did find one. I've got it on its way. And so if I use this, I'll probably, you know, put a dark slide in the back, take the back off, and put the ground glass on and use it to compose, because the viewfinder, well, it's relatively accurate. It's not perfectly accurate. And if I want to use any movements, then having the ground glass back would be essential. So in some cases, I'll probably use this. This lens doesn't have a lot of coverage for movements. I know there's probably some people out there going like, you're not going to use any movements with that lens. Actually, I looked at the image circle specs on this, and there's certainly enough image circle coverage for you know, using tilts and a little bit of rise. I do have a 90mm Schneider Angulon that I use on my 4x5 camera. I could mount it on a lens board for this. It's got plenty of coverage because it covers 4x5. And so if I have to mount that and use it, that would give me plenty of room for movements. And so if I need it, and you know, that's going to probably be helpful on some church buildings, rather than tilting the camera up and making all the verticals converge. I'll be able to use some rise on this, and that 90mm Angulon, you know, would give me the coverage I need to do that. So, you know, there's possibility I might use some of my Canon rangefinders. You know, I've got a Lights 35 Sumeron that I use with those, and the Canon lenses are really excellent. And so I don't know, I may produce some images with those too. But you know, then I'll use my Olympus digital cameras to do any digital recording, and that way I have those raw files, you know, if I need to do anything with those. But ultimately, I'd like to, you know, create a black and white collection of pictures probably primarily using HP5, or I've got some new film from Cat Labs. I don't know if many people have really messed with it. I'm just getting familiar with it. But it's this Cat Labs X320 Pro. And it's an interesting film. I'm going to be doing some testing with this. I've been waiting for just the right kind of cloud cover to take pictures of a subject. This has extended coverage in the 750 nanometer infrared range. And it's said to produce some really interesting images. What I want to see is, and something I haven't found a test for yet, is what does it do when you add like a 25A red filter or a yellow filter? What does that do to it? Since it has that extended infrared coverage, the pictures I've seen with that film almost have a little bit of an infrared look, and that your leaves on your trees are a little lighter, grass is lighter, some things like that. So I don't know. I'm going to be experimenting with some film too. But I largely want to shoot this whole project on medium format if I can, and so that's kind of the idea for the project. If you know of any, one of my fascinations is this military surplus church building, and it's so sad to me that they tore it down. I was a scoutmaster for about 15 years, and I took a Boy Scout troop to a fort here in Oklahoma called Fort Sill, and on the square in the middle of the fort, they have a church that's a similar design. It's actually rocked on the outside rather than like white lap siding, but the interior was very similar. When I walked inside that church, the sights and the type of woodwork and everything was so familiar that I could literally, even though he wasn't there, obviously my grandfather's passed away a long time ago by then, by that time, but I could literally smell his pipe tobacco, the smell of his smoking a pipe. He smoked a pipe, and you could smell it in the church, especially in his office, which was like, you've got a cross-shaped building, and if you're looking at it from, the long end of the cross, he was on the left side, his office was back in there, and if you walked into his office, you'd smell pipe tobacco. I mean, pretty strong. But when I walked into that church, I could just smell that smell of his pipe tobacco. It was a sensory overload. It really was very emotional at that time. And so I have this fascination with those buildings. I haven't been able to find any others that are really exactly like the one that I grew up around. If you know of any of these military surplus churches, I would love to see pictures of them. You can send me a message. I can get you an email address or whatever. I would just love to find some that are hopefully still in use and still in existence. But if you have ideas for other little white churches that are in or near the Oklahoma City area that I, should know about, please send me information. I know most of my viewers probably aren't in the Oklahoma City area. But if you have some, I also travel to Muskogee quite a bit. One of my sons lives there, and I know there's some churches there I'm going to start doing some research on. But yeah, if you have any ideas for subjects for this, I would love to hear about them. Anyway, that's the project, Little White Churches. I think it should be kind of fun, and like I say, it's going to probably take a few months to find as many as I can find and photograph them. I'll be, like I say, making videos about that, and hopefully we'll have some really interesting images to share from all that. Anyway, if you have any thoughts or questions, please don't hesitate to leave me a comment. I always love hearing from you, and as always, thanks for watching. You guys, they really don't want to stare at your derriere. No, they don't.